The owner abandons his female dog and puppies on the road, not knowing what awaits him. What happens next moves everyone. A cold wind howled outside the windows of Boston as Jack slowly opened his eyes. His head throbbed from yesterday's alcohol, and his mouth was as dry as sandpaper. He slowly rose from the bed, feeling every muscle in his body protest against the movement. He looked at the empty half of the bed beside him, the place where Emily used to sleep. 6 months had passed since she left, but the pain of her absence was still as fresh as the first day. Jack shuffled to the kitchen, automatically reaching for an empty coffee mug. He stopped mid-motion when his gaze fell on Bella's bowl in the corner. The female dog lay there, surrounded by her puppies that had been born just a week ago. Her brown eyes looked at him with love and devotion, which only deepened his sense of guilt. "Good morning, Bella," he mumbled, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. The dog wagged her tail but didn't move from her spot, protecting her little ones. Jack poured himself some coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window. Boston was coming to life, but for him, each day blended into a streak of grayness and depression. He once loved this city, its historic streets, traditions, and people. Now everything seemed foreign and distant. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. We're continuing. Memories of Emily flooded in, uninvited. Her laughter, the scent of her perfume, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams. When did it all go wrong? When did they stop talking to each other and start merely coexisting in this small, cold apartment on the outskirts of the city? Jack felt his hands tighten around the mug. The anger he had been carrying for months began to swell again. Anger at Emily for leaving, anger at himself for letting her go, and anger at the whole world for continuing to turn while his life stood still. Bella's barking pulled him from his gloomy thoughts. One of the puppies, a small black dog, was trying to climb into the water bowl. Jack sighed and went over to help the little one. As he held it in his hands, he felt the tiny heart beating quickly under his fingers. This life, so fragile and innocent, depended on him. "What am I going to do with you?" he asked quietly, more to himself than the dogs. Bella looked at him as if she understood his dilemma. Jack felt a pang in his heart. These dogs were the only thing keeping him sane for the past few months, but they were also a constant reminder of what he had lost. He put the puppy back with Bella and returned to the table. His gaze fell on the whiskey bottle that had been on the counter since last night. For a moment, he fought the temptation to pour himself a glass. Instead, he stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "I need some air," he muttered to himself, grabbing his jacket. As he left, he cast one last glance at Bella and her puppies. Something flashed in his eyes that he couldn't name himself, a mixture of sadness, longing, and what might have been the beginning of a desperate plan. Jack walked out into the cold Boston morning, leaving behind the silence of an empty apartment and the warmth of the dog family. He didn't yet know that the decisions he would make in the coming days would forever change his life and the lives of those he loved. Jack returned home after a long walk, his thoughts foggy from alcohol and despair, staggering. He entered the kitchen and immediately reached for the whiskey bottle. He took a swig straight from the bottle, feeling the liquid burn his throat. His gaze fell on Bella and her puppies, who were sleeping peacefully in their corner. "It's all your fault," he mumbled, his voice trembling with emotion. "If it weren't for you, maybe Emily would have stayed." In his clouded mind, a plan began to form. A plan that, in his eyes, would solve all problems. With unsteady steps, he approached the cabinet and pulled out a large box. For a moment, he stood over Bella, looking at her with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I'm sorry, girl," he whispered, gently waking the dog. Bella looked at him trustingly, not knowing what was happening. Jack began transferring the puppies to the box, one by one. Bella watched him anxiously but didn't protest, trusting her master. When all the puppies were in the box, Jack gestured for Bella to come. "Come on, girl, we're going for a ride." Bella obediently got into the car, and Jack placed the box with the puppies on the back seat. His hands trembled as he turned the key in the ignition. Part of his mind was screaming that this was madness, but alcohol and despair drowned out that voice. They drove along the winding roads of Massachusetts, passing sleeping houses and dark forests. Jack kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Bella, who was lying calmly next to the box with her little ones. Finally, he stopped the car on the side of the road near a small stream. He got out, feeling the cold air hit his face. For a moment, he stood motionless, struggling with his own thoughts. Finally, he opened the back door and pulled out the box. Bella jumped out after him, wagging her tail. "Stay!" he ordered sharply, and Bella obediently sat down, looking at him with trust. Jack approached the stream, carrying the box with the puppies. He set it on the ground and for a moment looked at the small sleeping creatures. He felt tears welling up in his eyes. "It's for your own good," he whispered, more to himself than to the puppies. "You'll find a better home, a better owner." He turned and quickly walked back to the car. Bella was standing by the door, looking alternately at him and at the box by the stream. Jack felt his heart break at the sight of her confused gaze. "Shago," he said, pointing to the box. "Go to your children." Bella didn't move, still looking at him hopefully, as if this was some game, that they would soon return home. Jack felt anger mixing with despair in his chest. "Go!" he shouted, and Bella cowered, frightened by his tone. Taking advantage of her moment of hesitation, Jack quickly got into the car and slammed the door. He started the engine and drove off with screeching tires, not looking back. In the mirror, he could see Bella running after the car, barking desperately. Jack accelerated, feeling tears streaming down his cheeks. He drove through the dark, empty roads of Massachusetts, fleeing from his deed, from himself. In his head, Bella's barking echoed, mixing with the hum of the engine and the beating of his own heart. When he finally reached home, he felt empty and exhausted. He entered, stumbling over the threshold. The silence that greeted him was deafening. There was no longer the sound of paws on the floor, no quiet breathing of puppies. Jack collapsed into an armchair in the living room, feeling the full weight of his decision fall on his shoulders. He reached for the whiskey bottle that was on the table and began to drink, trying to silence the pangs of conscience. But even alcohol couldn't drown out the image of Bella running after the car, nor the quiet whimpering of puppies in the box. Jack drank until he finally fell into a restless sleep, full of nightmares about abandoned dogs and disappearing people. He didn't know yet that this night would change everything, that his desperate decision would be the beginning of a journey that would force him to look deep inside himself and face the demons of the past. The days after abandoning Bella and her puppies blended into one streak of misty, painful memories for Jack. Every corner of his small apartment seemed to scream with silence, reminding him of the absence of his faithful companion and her little ones. Empty bowls in the kitchen, toys scattered on the floor. All of it was like a prick of conscience that he couldn't get rid of. Jack tried to drown out his thoughts with alcohol, but even that no longer brought relief. At night, he woke up drenched in sweat, hearing Bella's desperate barking in his dreams. During the day, he wandered around the apartment like a ghost, avoiding contact with neighbors and ignoring the increasingly frequent knocks on the door. On the third day after the incident, as Jack lay on the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling, he heard a knock. Initially, he ignored it, hoping the intruder would give up and leave. But the knocking didn't stop, becoming more and more insistent. "Jack, I know you're in there." The voice belonged to Margaret, an older neighbor who always had an eye on everything happening in the area. "Open this door, Ed, or I swear I'll call the police." Jack sighed heavily, gathering himself. With difficulty, he got up from the couch and dragged himself to the door. When he opened it, Margaret burst in like a storm, bringing with her the smell of freshly baked cookies and coffee. "For heaven's sake, Jack," she exclaimed, looking around the messy apartment. "What's going on here? Where are Bella and the puppies?" Jack felt his throat tighten. He wasn't prepared for this question, not now, not from anyone. "They left," he mumbled, avoiding Margaret's gaze. To a better home." Margaret narrowed her eyes, clearly not believing his words. "A better home, Jack. That dog loved you more than anything in the world. What really happened?" Jack felt his mask of indifference starting to crack. He collapsed heavily into a chair, hiding his face in his hands. I couldn't bear it," he whispered. They were a constant reminder of Emily, of what I lost. I had to get rid of them. Margaret stood in silence, processing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Oh, Jack, what have you done?" For the next hour, Jack, overcome by the weight of his secret, told Margaret everything. About the night full of alcohol and despair, about the mad drive to the stream, about Bella's last look. With each word, he felt the weight on his heart grow, but at the same time, as if part of that weight was being lifted from his shoulders. Margaret listened in silence, her face passing from shock through anger to deep sadness. When Jack finished, she placed her hand on his shoulder. "What you did was cruel and stupid," she said quietly. "But you still have a chance to fix it. We need to find them." Jack looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. How? Days have passed already. They could be anywhere. Margaret stood up, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll start from the stream. But first, you need to pull yourself together. Take a shower, eat something. Meanwhile, I'll make a few phone calls." When Margaret left to make calls, Jack stood motionless for a moment, feeling something sprouting in his heart that he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He moved to the bathroom, and the cold water flowing down his body seemed to wash away part of the guilt and despair. An hour later, Jack and Margaret were driving towards the stream. The car was filled with supplies, blankets, dog food, a first aid kit. Jack felt his heart beating faster with every mile passed. "What if they're not there?" he asked quietly as they approached their destination. Margaret looked at him with determination. "Then we'll keep looking. We won't give up until we find them." When they arrived at the spot, Jack felt his legs turn to lead. Margaret was the first to get out of the car, looking around carefully. "Bella!" she called. "Bella, where are you?" Jack joined her, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Bella, I'm sorry. Please come back." Their voices echoed through the forest, but only silence answered them. For the next few hours, they searched the area, calling and looking for any signs. As the sun began to set, Margaret placed her hand on Jack's shoulder. "That's enough for today," she said gently. "We'll come back tomorrow, and the day after, and we'll keep coming back until we find them." Jack nodded, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. As they returned home, he felt exhausted, but at the same time, lighter, as if the burden he had been carrying was slowly starting to diminish. That night, for the first time in a long time, Jack fell asleep without the help of alcohol. His dreams, though restless, were full of images of Bella and her puppies, not as a prick of conscience, but as a goal he had to strive for. Somewhere out there, in the darkness of the night, his family was waiting for him, and Jack vowed to himself that he would do everything to find them. While Jack and Margaret were conducting their search, fate had other plans for Bella and her puppies. In a remote part of the forest, where the stream widened into a small pond, lived Rose, a well-known local herbalist and healer. Her cottage, surrounded by a lush garden full of herbs and flowers, was a shelter for many lost souls, both human and animal. That morning, Rose was, as usual, gathering herbs for her morning tea. Her peaceful routine was interrupted by a soft whimpering coming from behind the bushes. Following the sound, the woman found an exhausted Bella and her weakened puppies, shivering from cold and hunger. "Oh, you poor things," Rose whispered, kneeling beside them. "What brought you here?" Bella looked at her warily, but didn't have the strength to run away. Rose slowly extended her hand, allowing the dog to sniff it. "Easy now. Little one, I want to help you." With great care, Rose transferred the puppies to her apron, and Bella, though exhausted, followed her to the cottage. In the warm interior, Rose prepared a soft bed for them near the fireplace. "You must be hungry," she said, preparing a bowl of warm milk for the puppies and pieces of meat for Bella. While the animals ate, Rose gently examined them, checking if they weren't injured. Days passed, and under Rose's care, Bella and her puppies slowly regained their strength. The herbalist noticed, however, that there was a deep sadness in the dog's eyes. "What happened to you, little one?" she asked, stroking Bella's head. "Who hurt you?" Meanwhile, Jack and Margaret didn't give up on their search. Every day they set out to a different part of the forest, leaving flyers and asking residents. Jack felt the weight of his guilt growing with each day, but at the same time, Where can I find this, Rose?" The man pointed out the direction and described the way. Jack thanked him warmly and set off in the indicated direction, feeling adrenaline coursing through his veins. When he reached Rose's cottage, he paused for a moment, gathering his courage. Finally, he knocked on the door. An older woman with warm, wise eyes opened it. "How can I help you?" Rose asked, looking at him carefully. I'm looking for my dog," Jack managed to say. "Bella, I heard she might be with you." Rose narrowed her eyes, as if trying to see through his soul. "So you're her owner," she said quietly. "Come with me." They entered the warm interior of the cottage. Jack looked around nervously until his gaze fell on a basket by the fireplace. There, surrounded by puppies, lay Bella. At the sight of Jack, she raised her head, and her eyes filled with a mixture of joy and fear. "Bella," Jack whispered, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. He wanted to come closer, but Rose stopped him with a gesture. "First, you need to tell me what happened," she said firmly. "Why did this poor soul end up alone in the forest with her puppies?" Jack sank into the nearest chair, feeling the weight of Rose's and Bella's gazes. Slowly, struggling to find the right words, he began to tell his story about Emily, about loneliness, about alcohol, and about that fateful night when he made the worst decision of his life. When he finished, a heavy silence fell in the cottage. Rose sighed deeply, then went over to Bella and stroked her head. "You see, little one, your master has come back," she said gently. "But the question is, are you ready to forgive him?" Bella looked at Jack, and then at Rose, as if seeking her advice. Slowly, carefully, she stood up and took a step towards Jack. The man froze, afraid to even breathe. "Bella," he whispered, extending a trembling hand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The dog came closer, sniffed his hand, and after a moment, gently licked it. This was the moment when the dam in Jack's heart broke. Tears flowed down his cheeks as he embraced Bella, whispering apologies and promises. Rose watched this scene with a mixture of sadness and hope. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "The trust you destroyed won't rebuild in an instant, but if you're willing to work hard, you might be able to fix what you broke." Jack looked at her through his tears. "I'll do anything," he promised. "Whatever it takes," Rose nodded. "In that case, you'll stay here for a while. You'll help me in the garden, take care of Bella and the puppies, and most importantly, you'll have to face the demons that brought you to this point." Jack nodded, feeling both fear and relief. He knew a difficult road awaited him, but for the first time in months he felt he had a purpose, that he could still fix everything. Bella lay down beside him, resting her head on his knees. Jack stroked her gently, feeling hope sprouting in his heart. This was the first step on a long road to redemption, but he knew that with Bella by his side and Rose's wisdom as a guide, he had a chance to become the man his faithful friend deserved. Days at Rose's cottage flowed at their own peaceful rhythm. For Jack, each morning started with an early wake-up call and work in the herbalist's garden. His hands, once soft and unaccustomed to physical labor, now became covered with calluses and scratches. But with each weed pulled, with each plant sown, he felt as if he was cleansing not only the earth, but also his soul. Bella was always close by, watching him carefully. Initially, she kept her distance, but over time she began to approach him, sometimes resting her head on his knee when he was taking a break. These moments were priceless for Jack, small signs that he might still be able to fix everything. Rose proved to be a stern but fair teacher. In the evenings, when Jack finished work in the garden, they would sit together by the fireplace. The herbalist taught him about the healing properties of herbs, but also had long conversations with him about life, mistakes, and redemption. "Jack," she said one evening, mixing herbs in a mortar, "what made you turn to alcohol instead of seeking help?" The man sighed deeply, stroking Bella, who was lying at his feet. I thought it would numb the pain, that it would make me forget about Emily, about loneliness. Rose nodded understandingly. Alcohol is a false friend. It gives momentary relief, but takes away much more. Do you know what you really lost by sinking into addiction? Jack pondered. I lost myself, he whispered after a moment. I lost the ability to love, to care for others. I almost lost Bella. Exactly, Rose agreed. But now you have a chance to regain all of that. Each day is a new beginning. Days passed, and Jack felt himself slowly regaining balance. He stopped thinking about alcohol. His thoughts filled with work, learning. Rose found her. Margaret came closer, looking at him carefully. I see a lot has changed, she said, noticing his tanned face and muscular arms. How do you feel? Better, Jack answered honestly. Much better. Rose, she's helping me. Not just to find Bella, but to find myself. Margaret smiled warmly. I'm glad. The whole neighborhood was worried about you. But I see you're in good hands. Their conversation was interrupted by barking. Bella was running towards them, and behind her followed a group of playful puppies. Jack felt his heart fill with warmth at this sight. Well, well, Margaret laughed. Looks like you have a whole family to take care of now. Those words hit Jack with unexpected force. Family. Yes, this was his family. Maybe not traditional, maybe not the one he once dreamed of, but real and full of love. In the evening, after Margaret had said goodbye and returned to the city, Jack sat on the porch of the cottage, watching the sunset. Bella was lying next to him, and the puppies were playing on the grass. Rose came out of the cottage, carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. She handed one to Jack and sat down beside him. What are you thinking about? She asked, sipping her drink. Jack was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. I'm wondering what will happen next, he finally admitted. I can't stay here forever, can I? Rose nodded. I know you can't, but you're not ready to go back yet either. So what should I do? The herbalist put down her cup and looked him straight in the eye. You need to face what you've been running from. Emily, your past, your fears. Only then will you be able to truly move forward. Jack felt fear tightening his throat. I don't know if I can do it, he whispered. Rose placed her hand on his shoulder. You can. You're stronger than you think. And besides, she pointed to Bella and the puppies, you're not alone. That night, Jack couldn't sleep for a long time. He lay on his bed, listening to the calm breathing of Bella and the puppies. He thought about Emily, about their life together, about how everything fell apart. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to fully feel the pain and longing, but also hope. Before dawn, he got up and went outside. The rising sun was painting the sky pink and gold. Jack took a deep breath, feeling new energy filling his body. I'm ready, he said quietly to himself, ready to face the past and build a new future. He returned to the cottage, where Rose was already preparing breakfast. She looked at him questioningly. I want to go back to Boston, Jack said firmly. I want to fix what I destroyed, and I want to find Emily. Talk to her. Rose smiled approvingly. That's a good decision, Jack. But remember, this is just the beginning of your journey. You still have many challenges ahead of you. Jack nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. He knew the road ahead of him wouldn't be easy, but with Bella by his side and Rose's teachings in his heart, he felt ready to face whatever fate would bring him. The morning Jack was to leave Rose's cottage was cool and misty. He stood on the porch, with Bella by his side and a bag slung over his shoulder. The puppies, now quite grown, ran around his feet, as if sensing that something was changing. Rose came out of the cottage, carrying a small wooden box. This is for you, she said, handing him the box. You'll find herbs here that will help you maintain calm and clarity of mind. Remember, the strength is within you, and this is just support. Jack accepted the gift with gratitude. Thank you for everything. Rose, I don't know how I'll ever repay you. The herbalist smiled warmly. The best payment will be seeing you become a better man. Now go, your future awaits. With a heavy heart, but full of determination, Jack set off on the road to Boston. Bella walked by his side, and the 3 puppies, 2 males and 1 female, followed them. The journey through the countryside was long, but Jack used this time for reflection and preparation for what awaited him. When they reached the outskirts of Boston, Jack felt his heart quicken. Familiar sights and sounds hit him like a wave of memories. Some residents, seeing him, stopped and looked with surprise. Jack nodded to them, feeling both foreign and familiar at the same time. The first stop was Margaret's house. The older woman, seeing him through the window, ran out to the yard. "Jack, you're back," she called, embracing him warmly. "And I see you're not alone," she added, looking at Bella and the puppies. "Margaret, I'm sorry for everything," Jack began, but the woman waved her hand. "The most important thing is that you're here. Come inside, you must tell me everything." Over a cup of tea, Jack told Margaret about the time spent with Rose, about his transformation and plans for the future. The woman listened attentively, nodding with approval. "And what about Emily?" she asked finally. "Are you going to look for her?" Jack sighed deeply. "Yes, that's my next step. Do you perhaps know where I can find her?" Margaret hesitated for a moment. She was last seen in New York City. She's supposedly working in some art gallery. This information made Jack's heart beat faster. New York City. The city where he and Emily had once planned to live together. The city of their dreams and hopes. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll set out there tomorrow," he said, standing up from the table. The next stop was his old apartment. When he stood before the door, he felt his hands trembling. Inside, everything was as he had left it, dusty and gloomy. But now, looking at this place with new eyes, he saw not only sadness, but also potential. He spent the rest of the day cleaning and tidying up. He threw away all the alcohol bottles, opened the windows, letting in fresh air. Bella and the puppies ran around the small balcony, their joyful barking filling the space with new life. In the evening, when he sat on the balcony, watching the setting sun over the Boston skyline, he felt a strange peace. He knew that tomorrow awaited him a difficult journey, not only physical to New York City, but also emotional to the heart of the problem that had destroyed his life. The next morning, Jack was ready for the road. He asked Margaret to take care of the puppies, but Bella was to accompany him. "She's part of this story," he thought. "She needs to be with me when I try to end it." The journey to New York City passed as if in a trance. Jack stared at the passing landscapes, his thoughts revolving around Emily. What will he say to her? How will she react to seeing him? Is there still a chance to repair what was broken? New York greeted them with its characteristic hustle and bustle. Jack, in Saam, with Bella on a leash, walked through the streets of Manhattan, looking for the gallery Margaret had mentioned. Finally, after several hours of searching, he stood in front of a small building with the sign, "New Horizons Gallery." He took a deep breath and pushed the door. The interior of the gallery was bright and spacious, with abstract paintings hanging on the walls. And then he saw her. Emily was standing by one of the paintings, explaining something to a client. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Jack felt his heart stop. For a moment, he wanted to back away, to run. But then Bella barked softly, as if giving him courage. Emily turned at the sound, and their eyes met. Time seemed to stand still. Emily paled, her eyes widening in surprise. "Jack," she whispered in disbelief. "Hi, Em," he replied quietly. "We need to talk." At that moment, Jack knew that regardless of how this conversation would go, his life would never be the same again. He stood on the threshold of a new chapter, ready to face the consequences of his actions and, perhaps, find a path to forgiveness and a new beginning. The silence that fell in the gallery seemed to last an eternity. Emily looked at Jack as if she was seeing a ghost. Her gaze moved from his face to Bella, who was sitting calmly by his side. Maybe we should go outside," Emily finally suggested, her voice slightly trembling. Jack nodded, feeling dryness in his throat. They went out to a small courtyard behind the gallery. The afternoon sun cast warm light on the cobblestone surface, and the air was filled with the scent of a nearby cafe. "How did you find me?" Emily asked, sitting on a bench. Jack sat next to her, maintaining some distance. Bella settled at his feet. "It's a long story," he sighed. "But I'm here because I had to see you. I had to..." "Can I apologize?" Emily looked at him with a mixture of emotions in her eyes. Surprise, sadness, maybe even a glimmer of hope. "Jack, so much time has passed." "I know," he gently interrupted her, "and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I've understood my mistakes, that I've changed." For the next hour, Jack told her everything, about his downward spiral after she left, about Bella and the puppies, about meeting Rose and the healing process. With each word, he felt as if he was removing a weight he had been carrying for so long. Emily listened in silence, her face going through a kaleidoscope of emotions. When Jack finished, silence fell between them. "I don't know what to say," Emily finally admitted. "When I left, I was sure it was the end, that never again." "Why did you leave?" Jack asked quietly. Asking the question that had been tormenting him for months, Emily took a deep breath. "I was afraid," she admitted. "I was afraid that I wasn't strong enough to help you, that your pain and anger would consume me. It was selfish, I know, but at the time it seemed like the only way out." Jack nodded understandingly. "And now, what do you feel now?" Emily looked him straight in the eye. Now I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads. Part of me wants to forgive you, to give us a second chance, but another part is still afraid." "I understand," Jack said. "I didn't come here to ask you to come back. I came to apologize and show you that I've changed, that I'm ready to move forward, whether you'll be part of my future or not." These words seemed to surprise Emily. She looked at Jack as if seeing him for the first time. "You really have changed," she whispered. "Bella, but maybe as friends, to get to know each other anew." Jack felt his heart speed up. "Do you really want that?" Emily nodded. "I'm scared, but I see how much you've changed, and I think I'm ready to give us a chance. Slowly, step by step." At that moment, Jack felt as if the weight of the entire world had fallen from his shoulders. Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time they were tears of relief and hope. "Thank you," he whispered, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. "I like that plan." As they were returning to the city center, Jack felt that he was on the verge of a new chapter in his life. He knew that the road ahead of him wouldn't be easy, that there would be ups and downs, moments of doubt and joy. But for the first time in a very long time, he felt ready to face whatever fate would bring him. With Bella by his side and Emily walking beside him, Jack understood that true happiness isn't about escaping problems, but about having the courage to face them, about being ready to change and constantly work on oneself. When they reached Emily's apartment, where Jack was to spend the night on the couch before returning to Boston to sort out his affairs, he felt that he was finally home, not in the sense of a physical place, but in the sense of peace of mind and a feeling of belonging. "Good night, Jack," Emily said, standing in the doorway of her bedroom. "Good night, Em," he replied, feeling his heart fill with warmth. That night, lying on the couch with Bella curled up at his feet, Jack understood that his journey was just beginning. But this time, he was ready for new challenges, for love, for life, and he knew that whatever the future would bring him, he would face it with an open heart and a clear mind. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what's really important, and sometimes you have to go through the darkest night to appreciate the beauty of the rising sun. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Jack, Bella, and Emily has touched your hearts. It's a tale about mistakes, forgiveness, and new beginnings, themes that touch each of us. If you want to continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with similarly moving stories for you. You can find it by clicking the link on the left side. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a thumbs up to this video. We bring you unique stories every day that explore the complexity of life and human relationships. Do you have your own stories of second chances and redemption? Share them in the comments. Who knows?